Hello, Matthew Bell with InsurancePrescription.com, and today I want to talk a little bit about estimating your retirement needs. There are a number of factors involved in successfully planning for retirement, and I've dealt with some of these in other videos and I'll continue to do so just to kind of sketch before we get into the actual nitty-gritty of estimation. Let me just say a word about some of the other pieces of that framework. So first of all, you're going to need to have some kind of a successful strategy for saving for your retirement. This is a complex matter. I'm not really going to get into it here. This is where you're going to hear about things like putting aside 10 to 15% of your income. You're going to have to decide what kind of retirement vehicles you want to invest in and put your money into. You're going to have to understand what your time horizon is, that is to say the amount of time between where you are now and where you want to be in terms of your retirement. You're going to have to consider things like potential rate of return in the various investment instruments. You're going to have to understand the risk, know your risk tolerance. You're going to have to understand how these vehicles are taxed. And once again, I get into this in other presentations. A second piece of that framework is going to be having some strategy for turning an asset into an income. So once you have savings accumulated, what you want to realize is that many retirement experts are going to tell you that your retirement is more about your income than it is about your assets. So you're going to have some way of turning that savings, turning that asset into an income stream, because after all, in retirement, it's going to be your medical costs, your utility bills, your grocery bills. Those things are the things you're going to have to use the money for, and there may be other things that you might want to use the money for. So joining a country club or taking a vacation, for example. Those are going to be things that I'm going to get into in other videos and have gotten into in previous videos. The third basic piece of this is that you're going to have some idea of what level of income you're going to require in retirement. So it's one thing to have savings, it's another thing to have a strategy for turning savings into income, but the third piece of that is how much income do you actually need? I'm going to sketch just a few things that you're going to want to consider when performing these kinds of estimations and projections. First, the usual disclaimer: I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give you financial advice, retirement advice, savings advice, tax advice. All this is just research leads, some of the overflow of my own investigations, and I just give these leads to you to do what you will with them and to pursue them, and hopefully they'll be of use to you. Now, one of the first considerations that you're going to want to take stock of is going to be age. So this is an obvious point, but it's going to have two different aspects to it. The first aspect to it is going to be, what is your current age? So if you're 20 years old thinking about your retirement, you're very rare and you're ahead of the curve, but the time horizon that you have is going to presumably be a lot longer than a person who's thinking about these issues for the first time in his or her 60s. Now, it's better late than never, but obviously the earlier you start to think about it, the more things you can put into place and the firmer your retirement plans will be, the more confidence you can have in them, presumably. The second aspect to the question of age is, what is the target age? What is the age you were thinking about retiring at? Now, there's a couple of different factors. Obviously, some people can retire very early, and it depends on what you mean by retirement. Retirement might be to you simply not having to clock in at a regular 9-to-5 job. Some people are able to do that in their 40s or 50s if they retire early with enough savings. For some people, retirement means not working at all, not being able to have any obligation to go into any job whatsoever. They could just sit on a beach for the rest of their lives. Depending on your conception of what retirement is, it's going to put certain constraints on how you're going to have to prepare for that. So if all you want to do is not attend the current 9-to-5, you may be able to do what's called a hybrid retirement. You may be able to get an income stream from some part-time job to supplement income, say from Social Security or from an annuity that you have privately, in order to provide for yourself in retirement. Now, in that conception, you're still working, but you're no longer going into a 9-to-5 job that maybe you went to for most of your adult life. So depending on your conception, you're going to have different levels of retirement assets that are going to be necessary in order to accomplish those goals. So to sit on a beach for the rest of your life is going to require presumably more money than it would to simply have a hybrid retirement where you are working at a part-time job and drawing off of Social Security and some kind of income stream that you've set up for yourself privately. Now, there are a couple of milestones and important ages to keep in mind when we're talking about age in terms of target. So on the one hand, your retirement age could be anything, but on the other hand, from the standpoint of the Internal Revenue Service, or IRS, 59.5 is a somewhat important age. It's the age at which you will start to be able to withdraw money from your retirement accounts without any penalty whatsoever. There is a provision for earlier withdrawals without a penalty under certain conditions. So for instance, leaving employment can sometimes also qualify you for penalty-free withdrawals, but you have to consult your tax preparer. Another important age is going to be the age of 62. This is the age at which Social Security allows you to take benefits early, but you will take a 25 to 30% reduction in your benefit if you take it early. A further age is going to be 65. 65 is the age at which you're going to have access to Medicare. So health insurance going into retirement is going to be an important consideration, and for many people this is an expense that is going to need to be carefully planned for. Full retirement age with Social Security is going to depend on your date of birth, so anywhere from age of 65 all the way to the age of 67 is going to be, for most people, their full retirement age. That's going to be the age at which you have access to your primary insurance amount, which is essentially your full Social Security benefit. Now you want to bear in mind that the full Social Security benefit is really only designed to provide at most about 40% of your pre-retirement income. These figures are not hard and fast. The main point is that Social Security is not intended to replace 100% of your income. You have to be clear about that. Now, it's possible to wait until the age of 70, so there's another important age. At the age of 70, you actually get an increase. It's the maximum Social Security benefit that you can qualify for. Every year after your full retirement age, for 4 years, you get an 8% increase in what your Social Security benefit would be up to age 70. So at age 70, we're talking about 132% of your full retirement benefit that you would qualify for. A further important age is going to be the age at which the IRS requires you to take out required minimum distributions. That used to be 70 and a half prior to the Secure Act. Now it's been pushed to age 72. Beyond age, you're also going to want to take into account life expectancy. Now, life expectancy, it's a very kind of sensitive issue, obviously, but in the 50s, life expectancy was in the 60s, and currently it's in the upper 70s or even low 80s. And so you want to consider this because obviously your retirement assets are going to have to last you for the whole of your life. Another aspect of life expectancy, though, is going to be the fact that living longer doesn't necessarily mean preservation of health for that entire period of time. So even though people are living longer, healthcare costs are predictably going to increase for you. Medical conditions may surface. You may need long-term care. And so these things are going to put additional pressures on your retirement savings and on the income streams that you create for yourself. Life expectancy is also going to be a function of what your current health is. If you know you have some medical condition, then it's going to tend to put a downward pressure on your life expectancy. And if you're super healthy, maybe obviously, or if you know longevity is in your family, maybe you realize lots of people in my family live well into their 90s. You want to consider those personal factors as well as you're planning for how much money you're going to need and how long a period of time you want to try to preserve your assets for. Legacy planning is also going to factor in. Do you want to have money left over to provide for kids, grandkids, and the like of that? This is related to the financial situation. So not just your financial situation, but that of your family. Do you have disabled or long-term care needy parents yourself in your retirement? Will you be caretaking for a family member? Do you have disabled children? Do you have maybe somebody who's special needs? All of these things are going to factor into how much money you're going to need in retirement. If you intend to support other people besides you and, let's say, a spouse, you're going to also have to factor that into your retirement plan as well. This is going to relate to what goals do you have. So different people have different conceptions of retirement. For some people, retirement may just mean taking it easy in your own house. For other people, it might mean traveling the world. So different conceptions of retirement are also going to dictate different levels and different needs in terms of savings and income. There's a couple of aspects to this. Obviously, this can relate back to the previous consideration of family. Do you want to provide for children to go to school? Do you want to provide college funds? Do you want to buy a boat? Do you want to take vacations every year? Tom Hegna, the retirement expert, also pointed out one time, and kind of humorous, but it's kind of serious at the same time. He said the other thing you have to remember is that retirement can really be divided up, he said, into three aspects. The first is your go-go years, where you are free and healthy enough to do whatever you want. The second is your slow-go years, where you start to slow down, you start to experience a little bit of health problems. And then he said the third aspect is your no-go years, where actual travel or other things become just impossible based on the level of disability and impairment that you might be suffering from. So you also want to bear that in mind, that when you retire, if you have any ambition to travel at all, there's probably a window of time, and we don't know obviously how long or how big of a window that will be for any of us, but you want to take advantage of those opportunities if you can, when you are healthy enough to do so. And all of these factors are going to play into estimations for how much you actually need. So when you're thinking about how much you're going to actually need to retire, one of the mechanisms that people use is called the multiples rule of thumb. So some people will suggest you need to have 8 times your income, 10 times your income, 15 times your income. These rules of thumb are somewhat abstract. They're based on the presumption that you are going to have some continuity between what you were spending before your retirement and what you're going to be spending after retirement. Some of these do take cognizance of the fact that expenses are going to change a little bit. So, for instance, medical costs might go up, mortgage payments might go down. There's probably going to be a continuity in terms of utilities, in terms of groceries, unless you change the city or the living situation. Now, another aspect of the multiples approach is going to be that you're going to have to factor in your time horizon. If you're looking to retire over a longer period of time, the multiple can be a little smaller because the idea there is you're going to be investing some of this money and that the investment return is going to make up a lot of the difference. If your time horizon is short, or if you're looking to retire early, then the multiple might go up. And you might see estimates anywhere from 15 times, 20 times, 25 times, or more in terms of estimations of how much retirement income you need to save before you can retire. And once again, this is going to tie into the goals. Now, the second rule of thumb is what's called the replacement rule of thumb. Now, here is where you will get people who will tell you you need to save 60% of your retirement income, or that you need to be able to replicate 60% of your retirement pre-retirement income in retirement, or 70% or 80%. Now, the reason why these percentages are generally less than 100 is because people are thinking of this in terms of certain expenses are going to drop away. Usually on the replacement rule of thumb, people are thinking, well, you previously went to an employer, you previously had a commute, you may have had to purchase certain clothing to wear, you may have purchased food every day for lunch, and so those expenses are going to drop away. Additionally, while you're working, you're saving for your retirement, and so a part of your pre-retirement income went to retirement savings, which are now actually in retirement. You're not saving for retirement, so those expenses go away. Another aspect of it is the presumption that certain debts are going to drop away. You're going to pay down a credit card, you're going to pay down your car, you're going to pay down and off your mortgage. Tax is going to change for you and so on. Maybe you drop in terms of your tax bracket, and so the presumption is you're possibly going to be paying less in terms of income tax. One of the most important things to recognize about this replacement approach is that it's thinking about it in terms of the income. But in many people's minds, it's not so much in terms of income from pre-retirement to retirement, but it's in terms of expenses. And so a further approach is actually to calculate expense projections. Now, these are also just going to be estimates, and that's important to underscore. These are estimates. Retirement planning is like trying to hit a moving target. You're going to have to reevaluate these things as you move forward. You're going to get new information. Maybe you get diagnosed with a health condition. And so all of these things are going to factor into your expense projections. But the idea here is that you're going to be able to make certain assumptions about expenses in terms of what they're going to be like in your retirement. Specifically, some expenses are going to predictably go down and some are going to predictably go up. So for example, those expenses that might tend to decrease in retirement include certain things like debt repayments. The idea is the older you are, the longer you've had to pay on certain debts, and so the more likely it is you're going to have paid off a credit card or paid off a loan. Household furnishings are sometimes mentioned, the fact that you've probably got your living environment set up the way you like it. Income taxes, if the presumption is that rates are going to stay the same and you drop into a lower bracket, your taxes are going to be a little less. Mortgage, part of your debts, the idea is your house is more likely to be paid off the older you are, presuming you haven't refinanced or taken any loans out against it. Property taxes might decrease, and again, transportation costs. So for instance, you're not commuting to work. Now, you're going to have vacation costs, then that's going to tend to, again, increase transportation costs. So it's a very personal kind of consideration. On the other hand, certain expenses are predictably going to stay the same or even increase in retirement. Those would include things like grocery bills. It's not likely that your eating habits are going to change dramatically the day you decide to retire. House maintenance, that's never going to go away, and the longer you live in your house, the more likely it is you're going to have to perform some maintenance on it. Medical bills and long-term care, this one's huge. Predictably, your health is going to get worse as you go along. That's going to increase your medical costs, medical insurance, and other prescription drug costs, and so on. Long-term care may become an issue. I have separate video presentations on that. Your recreational costs might go up, particularly if your conception of retirement and your goals include things like travel and other things. Utilities, pretty much going to stay the same or possibly increase. And finally, vehicle maintenance is another one. The longer you have the same car, the more likely it is that it's going to require some kind of maintenance. Now, these are going to vary widely. If you have special needs children, disabled parents, or parents who you're going to have to take care of, then that's also going to put an upward pressure on your expenses. As we said, retirement conception is going to play a role. But these are just a few factors that you're going to want to consider when you're thinking about estimations for what you're going to need in retirement. I may comment on some of these in greater depth in other videos, and as I said, I have talked about the savings strategy and approaches. We've talked about how to convert a savings into or an asset into an income stream, and then this is part of the overall retirement planning picture, trying to figure out exactly how much money you're going to need in retirement. Once again, this is just the best we can do is estimate and sort of project into the future. We don't have crystal balls or the ability to tell what our experiences are going to be like precisely, so you have to be somewhat flexible. And probably the most fundamental piece of advice is you kind of want to over-prepare if you possibly can. You want to do more than what you think you're going to need to give yourself a little bit of room. But if something that I've said was of help to you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be alerted to new content as it becomes available. I thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again in another video. Thank you.